let's talk about why your psychic gifts are not working. Because I know so many of you want to know, first of all, do I have psychic gifts? What are they? How do I access them? And the answer is yes, you do. And yes, you can. But there are many things that stop you from accessing them. And we have to start kind of at the beginning of that, which is the baseline of where our psychic and spiritual gifts come from. And that is our intuition. So today I'm going to tell you the things that are blocking your intuition, which is this starting place or entry point into developing your spiritual and psychic gifts. And to do that, I'm pretty much going to tell you all of the things that I disagree with that people are teaching you about intuition. So stay with me and we're going to get deep into it today. And if you haven't met me yet, hello, my name is Tahverlee. Welcome to my channel, where I believe that we have access to such great amounts of power when we know how to go inward and access our own inner wisdom. And it lives all within inside our body. In fact, I believe in this so much that I just published a book about it. You can find the link in the description. There's tons of information, rituals and spells and psychic development inside the book. But today, I really wanted to go into this topic about intuition because I'm seeing a lot of information out there that just actually isn't correct. Not only is it not correct, it's not enough. It's not enough. And yes, we can talk surface level ways of diving into intuition, which again is the baseline to the higher levels of psychic and spiritual development that you desire. But intuition is so innate. We have it all the time, regularly, all of us. Yet we block it. And I'm going to tell you how we block it today. And so if you've heard a lot of things like, to develop your intuition, you need to surrender, or you need to just, trust in the moment and trust more of what's coming. And yes, and what does that even mean? When someone just, gives a whole teaching on, trusting your intuition and surrendering to your intuition, how? The question is how? Like, how do I do that? What does that mean? So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to tell you the reasons why you're not trusting your intuition, why it's not working, which is knowing it's the baseline to your spiritual and psychic gifts. Then we can roll this back and look at it as, okay, if I can do these things, if I can work on these things, then I can start working on opening my senses deeper. Because if we don't do these things first, then no matter how much you open your senses, no matter how much you work on clairvoyance or claircognizance or any of the clairs, they're not going to stick. So let's start by me telling you a story about a time where I had very, very strong intuition and didn't do the thing that I needed to do in that moment to actually use, trust, and surrender to my intuition, which is what we hear often. And it was during a time when I was doing a lot of training as a Krav Maga instructor, which is a type of self-defense. And in our self-defense systems, we talk a lot about the precursors to needing self-defense, which is situational awareness, which really is your intuition. Because a lot of people know when something doesn't feel right. And so in the terms of self-defense, we focused on, this situational awareness, but really it was about intuition. So I was in the process of lots of training around this area. And it just happened to be at a time where I was leading a really big event in Las Vegas. And there was one night, it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I was staying at the very top of this hotel, and I wanted to go get a snack. So I get in the elevator at 10 o'clock at night to go down to get a snack. So I get in the elevator, and it stops 3 floors down. And 2 very intoxicated men got on the elevator. And in that moment, my intuition told me, not safe. You shouldn't be in here. I felt it. I knew it. And what happened is a couple of floors later, I started to get the intuitive feeling to get off the elevator. It's a simple solution. Just get off the elevator. And I didn't because I thought, they're going to think that I'm weird. They're going to know that I'm getting off because of them. So I literally, in that moment, didn't listen to my intuition, didn't take the steps that I needed to take that I knew were the right steps because I was afraid of offending them. And I rode, this whole thing happened in the course of just a few minutes, but I rode to the bottom of the elevator. And by the time I got to the very bottom, they were right near me, harassing me, saying very unkind, sexual, predatory type things because they were extremely intoxicated. And when I got to the bottom floor, of course, I, used very loud words and said things to make sure that they stepped away from me. And I got off the elevator and everything was fine. Thank goodness. And so this is the number one way that I see most of us blocking our intuition is just what I did in that moment. And that is we are more worried about offending someone else or what someone else is going to think than we are in actually listening to what we know to be true in our body. That's our intuition. And every time we ignore it in the effort of not offending or upsetting somebody else, we're turning it down a notch. We're turning it down, we're turning it down, we're turning it down to the point where we don't even get to feel the intuitive hits. And I say this to you because it's so important that we recognize that there are solutions to this. Meaning you don't always have to be stuck in an elevator with two drunk people to practice this because it comes up all day for most of us all the time. And here's the thing. When we choose to be more concerned with being judged or what someone else is going to think of our decision or if this is going to offend someone, if we spend more of our energy thinking about that than what's actually happening in our intuition, then we're losing it. And this, over the course of time, for a lot of people, just means what happens is your intuition gets so quiet because the fear of offending people or receiving judgment becomes so much louder. And then you can't hear or feel your intuition. This isn't hard to fix. It just takes practice. So the best way to handle this, if you know this is you, because I already know that you know this is you, for sure, there have been opportunities in your life where you have met someone, and a lot of times this comes about with other people specifically. And it doesn't mean, your close relationships or just your external relationships. It just means intuition is often reflecting energy. And so this happens with other people often. We feel something that either feels really good or feels really icky about a person, and we don't take an action because we don't want to create offense. Now, you might ask, well, how does that impact intuition that I might have about myself and my own path and my career or, my manifesting? Well, it's all the same intuition. But the source of how we most commonly block it is when it comes to other people. And I know that you know this because for sure you have met someone in your life or come across someone where you've got this really strange ick feeling. It could just be at a business event. It could be at the grocery store. It could be, at a party. It could be a friend of a friend. It could be your kid's friend. You get a really kind of like icky feeling. How we can handle that without being worried about judgment or offending someone is to just physically remove yourself for a few moments, whether you go to the bathroom, step in the other room, and take a breath and just say to yourself, I recognize I'm feeling something icky. I may not know what it means, but I'm acknowledging it. That's the most important part, is to acknowledge it. That's it. Doesn't mean you have to take an action step and jump off the elevator, which I could have and should have. Doesn't mean you have to take an action step. It just means acknowledge it. Because when you give it your attention, you're giving your intuition power. And again, reminding you that this is how deep and powerful your psychic and spiritual gifts will become. You can give them power too, but you have to start here. So it doesn't mean that you have to walk away, leave an event, end a relationship, kick a kid out of your house. It just means taking a moment to acknowledge, I'm feeling this thing. I'm acknowledging it feels icky. Give it a word. Give it a label. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel happy. This doesn't feel joyful. Or give it the opposite word. This feels great. This person has some sort of meaning in my life. There's something special about this being. Great. Just acknowledge it. And then, of course, in time, you can learn how to put practices in place. Like if it's an ick feeling, what to do with boundaries. And, if you need to love somebody from afar or not have somebody in your life that gives you an ick feeling, that's a different story. Just acknowledge the feeling. Now, if you feel this feeling often with somebody in your life, like a friend that you think is a friend, or a colleague, or somebody in your family, and you feel this ick feeling often, I recommend you go into it deeply. And that's a different conversation on how you handle relationships in your life with people that don't wish you well, because I know that you feel it if that's the case. Okay, so that's blocker number 1. We ignore our intuition and we give more space and energy and thought into not offending somebody else before we're giving acknowledgement to our intuition. The second most common way that I see people blocking their intuition, which is what eventually blocks their psychic gifts, is that the narrative of a situation or story of what they think should be isn't what their intuition is telling them. So let's say, for example, you decide you want to do this thing or go down this path or pursue this friendship or this relationship, or you're going to do this thing and you get really excited about it and it feels good in the moment. Maybe you talk to people about it. You get really excited. And then all of a sudden, something doesn't seem to feel good about it anymore. But the narrative to you is, well, it felt good at the beginning, and I know I think, like, I'm pretty sure this is the right thing, and I know I've always wanted to do this thing, or I have this idea, and we build a narrative in our mind of how it should unfold. And when our intuition starts coming in and saying, well, maybe a slight little curve here, or a slight turn this way, or a deeper conversation about this partnership, or something like little additional bits of information start coming in. Instead, we hold so tightly onto what we think it should be, meaning the narrative of what we thought it should be. We hold onto it so tightly that we're not willing to pivot. And so when we hold on to something so tightly and we're not willing to pivot, no matter what it is, who it is, or what the circumstances are, then we're ratcheting down our intuition. Because our intuition might say, yes, this thing, this person, this situation is good. And then it also might come in a day later, a week later, month later, year later, 10 years later, and say, this isn't anymore. Could be a full stop sign, could be a slight pivot. And I just mean the different levels of how intuition can lead you. But if we get so firmly stuck in what we think it should be, meaning we have this narrative playing in our mind of what we think it should be, and our intuition isn't in alignment with what we think it should be, we ignore it. And I know you know what I'm talking about, because this happens all the time, especially for people that are doing like projects or big manifestations or spell work or on the spiritual path or own their own business or building anything, like any creative thing in your life. If you make a plan and you tell yourself a narrative, especially if you've done visualization and mantras and you have this whole spell maybe built out around it and you have it all in place, and then all of a sudden your intuition starts circling in and says, you might want to go this way or pause. That's not the right way. You got 2 steps in that direction. That's all you needed. Now go this way. But when our mind says, I know it's supposed to be this, and your intuition says, it's actually not, and you ignore it, you're turning it down. So the solution, similar to the solution in the first situation, which is we get more concerned with with offending other people than we do at listening to our intuition, which means we give more energy to the idea of fear and judgment, and our intuition gets quiet. Same thing here. When we are too tied to the ending, too tied to the narrative, too tied to what we think it should be, then our intuition gets quiet because we get too tied to the end result. Same solution. And that is acknowledge that your intuition is telling you something different than you thought it was going to be. Doesn't mean you have to take action right away. Doesn't mean you have to pivot right away. Doesn't mean you have to like put the stop sign up. Doesn't mean you have to burn down relationships. Doesn't mean you have to do any of those things. It just means sit with it. Acknowledge, oh, my intuition is now telling me something different than I thought, than what I believed was going to happen, and sit with it. And sometimes in these particular cases, a couple of days of allowing yourself to sit with whatever your intuition is telling you allows your body time to process and allows your mind to kind of catch up to it. Sometimes you just need a little bit of space and time to acknowledge my intuition is doing something different now, or my intuition doesn't match what I thought was going to happen. Now, let's go back to the beginning, that how important it is to have your intuition in alignment if you're going to dive deeper into your spiritual and psychic gifts. Because here's the thing. Your spiritual and psychic gifts are rarely going to match what you believe or think is going to happen. I promise you this. Your spiritual and psychic gifts are definitely going to be loud and tell you things about people and circumstances in your life that you might not have thought or wanted to know. But it's important. And I promise you that when you really learn and focus on mastering the baseline of intuition, your spiritual and psychic gifts will improve. Now, these are just two examples of how we block intuition. There are, of course, other ways, but these are the primary ways, real, practical ways that I see this happen to people all the time. And so let's talk about the things that I disagreed with at the beginning, the idea of surrendering and trusting. So yes, that's important. But what happens when you surrender to your intuition and your intuition tells you something about a circumstance in your life that would be very painful for you to end or change or would require hard work? What happens if your intuition or your spiritual gifts come in and show you that the path you're on isn't actually the right path, that there's a slight skew over here that would be better, but is going to require you to make change? So surrendering and trusting your intuition is not enough, because in practicality, doing that isn't always as simple as it seems. Now, it might be simple to just hop off an elevator. Your intuition might even tell you, oh, don't eat at that restaurant. The wait's going to be 2 hours. Go 2 blocks down and there'll be a faster place and the food will be better. Easy to listen to. Those are all things to practice. But really, where the rubber meets the road is in the big things in life when your intuition is not aligned with what you think it should be. All right, make sure you subscribe, drop a comment, check out my book, Sacred Magic. Link is in the description, and I'll see you again next time.